just wanted to talk about our sponsor real quick over here at the Tin Roof Podcast, that being Dubby. They are an energy drink and sports drink company. You can buy their powders online over at dubby.gg. Put in the code STORIES10, and that'll get you 10% off. Right now, I'm drinking the Amoeba Elixir, which is a sour gummy bear flavor. I love it. So go over there, get you some great energy drink powders or sports drink powders. They sell shaker cups too, and that code again is STORIES10. Check it out. Hey, you've probably heard before us talking about the Tin Roof playlist where it's got a bunch of our favorite songs on there. We've updated it. Definitely go check it out. Some great music to help you get through your day. We've got Sleep Token, Toby Keith, Roger Miller, Johnny Cash, Korn, Linkin Park. So many great bands on there and artists in general. So go check it out. Tin Roof playlist over on Spotify. Everybody to the Tin Roof Podcast. This is like the third out of, well, I guess final interview that I've got scheduled at the moment. And this one I'm really excited about because it combines a lot of different things that I enjoy. And me and this guy, we've never really chopped it up before or anything like that. So I'm really excited to have a discussion with him today because he's a comic book writer. And, well, actually, how about we let him tell us about himself? So, Caleb, welcome to the Tin Roof Podcast.
Hi. My name is Caleb Palmquist. I'm a comic book writer. I've been writing comics for about 8 years. I'm best known for my comic book Unicorn Vampire Hunter. But right now I'm on Kickstarter with a book called Dragon Grit, which is a fantasy western.
That's where I messed up. So I wanted to get the Kickstarter info. So like I knew the numbers prior to this, but for whatever reason, like my brain, because I play TTRPGs, my brain went to Dragonheart, and I was like, that's really close to Daggerheart, and I was like, for whatever reason, my brain was doing that, and so that's why I couldn't find the info that I wanted. How are you close to being funded, or where are you at?
Oh, I'm well overfunded. Yeah.
Dude, that's fantastic.
So we launched a couple weeks ago, as of this recording, with a $3,500 goal, and right now we're sitting at $10,400.
Dude, that is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, do you have stretch goals that you're going to be doing or have done?
Yeah. The first stretch goal is like an audio commentary. So I wrote this book with my wife, Lorelai Jonathan, and we're doing an audio commentary. We're the $8,000 stretch goal that we hit. We're just going to talk about how we work together and what our future plans for the book are. And then at 12,000, we have a trading card we're unlocking for everybody. And then at 16,000, we're going to add some bonus content to the book.
Oh man, that is some really cool stuff. So, I mean, you're gonna get the audio commentary. Help them at least get to the 12,000 so you can get a trading card, because like the artwork for this is beautiful. So I can only imagine what that trading card is gonna look like. And I mean, 16,000 extra stuff added to the book. That's always awesome. So, can you give us a peek at what that might be as far as maybe variant covers, extra artwork in the pages? Are we talking about extended story?
So we're talking about just sort of behind the scenes stuff. So it'd be concept art from when we were developing the characters and some character bios and stuff like that.
That kind of stuff's always cool. We've talked about a lot of stuff around Dragon Gate, but we haven't really talked about what it's about. So it's actually a Western, but it's got dragons in it.
That's right. So it is a fantasy Western. So it takes place in a world where people ride dragons instead of horses. And the main character is a woman named Vera, who is sort of a tough as nails ex-outlaw who is trying to make a living on the straight and narrow with her fire dragon Blaze. And she ends up taking on a job from what the best term would be like a city slicker. This kid from out east inherits his father's estate on the frontier. And then when he gets out there, the family dragon, this old mist dragon, keeps wandering away, and he doesn't know why. And Vera figures out that it's because she's dying, and she's trying to make her way back to her dragon graveyard, sort of like how elephants have elephant graveyards. And so this young man, Robin, hires her to escort them across the wilderness, and they have to go on foot because the dragon can't fly anymore. And then so it's a travelogue story going across the West in this fantasy Western, and all the while they're being pursued by bandits, a gang of bandits led by an old rival of Vera's.
I am so blown away, dude. That sounds so amazing. Like the artwork and everything that I got to see, like to get to know you through the press packet was fantastic. And I was like, man, I can't wait to talk about this with this guy. And to know that there's more than one kind of dragon, because whenever you said fire dragon, I was like, wait, hold on. He succinctly said fire dragon, which means there's more than that. So there's mist dragons. What else? Like, what other kinds are there?
Sure. So basically, in this world, there are wild dragons and there are domestic dragons. Sort of like wolves and dogs, or like wild horses and domestic horses. And so, uh, if you've got a domestic dragon that's been bred and trained for a specific purpose, it's going to be, sort of like your like standard like draft horse. But then wild dragons are harder to tame, and a lot of times won't take a rider, but they come in many varieties and many different sizes. So we're going to meet some fire dragons, at least one mist dragon. At one point, we're going to meet a wild treasure dragon, which is the kind of dragon you don't want to mess with, and a few other types. So it's definitely there's the Lorelei, my wife and co-creator, is really big into world building, and has really thought through a lot of the different implications of, wild versus domestic dragons, and what kind of combinations and things that could come up with.
I'm so for this 100% because like I play D&D, and so like the dragon part of it, I grew up here in Missouri, and so like the whole like Western thing is a huge ordeal to me, especially so in the like comparing your book to like other things so people might have an idea of kind of what it's like. You mentioned that it's like Louis L'Amour books, and I love Louis L'Amour books because my grandpa read them, and he finally, like once I got to a certain age, he's like, you need to check these out. And he handed me one, and man, I tell you what, from then on, I was hooked. I loved not only watching Western movies, but then I started like reading Louis L'Amour, and the fact like with the world building and everything all combined together, this is an amazing project.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I actually had a very similar experience to you, I think, because my grandma, like growing up, my grandma had she had a lot of books, but two collections she was very proud of. She had a shelf full of Agatha Christie books, and she had a shelf full of Louis L'Amour books. Those were like her two favorite authors. And so I definitely have a penchant for both mystery, like detective stories, and for Westerns. And then I would say that probably some influences that people might be a little more familiar with are like True Grit, obviously, is an inspiration for this. That's where the title comes from. And then also 310 to Yuma is a big inspiration, is a travelogue story. And, you've read Louis L'Amour, so you know that a lot of the stories are travelogue stories, like either a cowboy on his own or with a group or escorting people or whatever, kind of making their way across the wilderness and surviving. Is a big theme of those kinds of stories. And then, of course, there's influences from Tombstone, which is just my, probably my all-time favorite movie.
Probably one of the most quotable movies ever.
Yeah.
And True Grit was like one of my first like real, like before I watched Tombstone, was probably my first favorite Western movie. And then like after that was probably Rio Bravo. And so I'm totally amazed, and I have so many questions and things I want to talk about with this because this is such a cool project. And I love that Tombstone is your favorite because, like I said, it's a quotable movie. The quality of it, the actors that are in it. I mean, how can you get better than like Bill Paxton, Sam Elliott, Val Kilmer, Kurt Russell? I mean, it's just awesome. Top. So yeah, man, this is so cool. One thing I wanted to talk about with like the dragons part of it, uh, are you gonna have any like scenes in there where you are like breaking wild dragons to be domestic dragons? Because like that's a big thing, especially like in the Western world. Uh, and I love the association with horses. And instead of riding horses, we're riding dragons and everything. And you guys have put a ton of thought into that already. I can tell. And so like that's just one thing because I'm a big going to music for just a second. Uh, but I'm a big Chris Ledoux fan, and Chris Ledoux was a pro rodeo rider at one point and was riding wild broncs and stuff. And so like he sang a lot about breaking wild horses and stuff like that, and that's just right up my alley.
Yeah, so we do have not in the first issue, but coming up in some of the future issues, that's definitely a factor. That's something that a specific influence, which isn't maybe not the prototypical example, but the animated movie Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. You've seen that movie with Matt Damon?
I saw it one time whenever I was younger, and I thought it was good, but I haven't watched it in so long. I'm gonna have to give it a rewatch because it is a good movie, and I know they've got like a Netflix series that they did for a little while too.
Yeah, well, the Netflix series was like a show of like one of those things for like preschool children. I don't know that it is that one's worth watching necessarily unless you've got kids, but the original movie was 2002, so it's quite a long time ago. I mean, I was like 11 when that movie came out. So
wait, hang on, you were 11 then?
Yeah.
So you're what, 32, 33?
Yeah.
Me too.
So right on.
Perfect.
There you go. We're peak millennials. Did you know that those 90 and 91 were the highest birth years of millennials?
Really?
Yep.
I did not know that. That's incredible.
Yeah. But yeah, so in that movie there's a big scene with trying to break Spirit, the horse, right? And we took a little bit of inspiration for that for a scene that will be coming in a little bit down the line. And so that's definitely a factor in the story. I think we've really managed to integrate a lot of cool Western tropes into the story, and integrate them into the story that we're telling.
That's amazing. I think we focused on like the genre of it quite a bit, and even the dragons. Let's talk about Vera. Tell us a little bit more about her.
Yeah, so basically she's so she was an outlaw. She grew up in an outlaw gang, which is something you'll learn about as the story goes on. And at some point she made a break from that gang and with her dragon blaze and wanted to live a life on the straight and narrow. And one thing she started doing to make money was she's running star routes. Now that's a real historical thing that essentially it's almost like the Pony Express, like running delivery routes out to places that other people wouldn't go because it's too dangerous. Like you got to be willing to defend your package if you're running a star route. And so right in the beginning, if you've read the preview pages, and those are the same ones that are on the Kickstarter, she is coming back into town with a package, and she gets attacked by bandits and has to defend herself against them. And so that's what sort of how she's making a living at the beginning of the story. But then she is getting less and less work because the railroads are being built, which sort of make that kind of delivery system a little bit obsolete. So that's when she's got to start looking for new ways of making a living. And does she go back to being an outlaw, or does she find some other way to make a living? And that's when the young man Robin comes along.
Dude, I love like the struggle of the choices and like the whole like actually bringing in the whole point of the Pony Express with the star routes and the true conflict of like that those Pony Express riders faced because well, the railroad became a real issue for them because that's how things were getting shipped then.
Yep.
And so to bring that in and incorporate that is so fantastic. This is going to be an amazing read. I cannot wait to read this. So you said Robin. Can you tell us a little bit more about him? I don't want to give away too much, but man, like this is really cool, and I want to
Sure,
learn more
yeah,
about
no, I'm
this story.
happy to talk about it. So Robin is a young man who is studying out east, and then his father dies, um, and he comes out to this frontier town, where his father owned an estate, and he's got this dragon, and so he's kind of like trying to figure out what to do with his inheritance and trying to figure out kind of what to do with this estate. And he's got this dragon he doesn't know what to do with. And basically, he's well educated, and but he has no idea how to handle life on the frontier. And so you're going to meet him in issue 1, and then as the story goes on, you'll see, like he wants to, on their journey, bring like a whole wagon full of like books and clothes and all this other stuff, right? That's like, of course, is just really going to be an eye roll affair for Vera, right? Who travels light naturally because she's been living out on the frontier basically her whole life. And so kind of as the story goes on, Robin is going to learn how to survive and learn from Vera, and hopefully Vera will also learn from Robin, right? Because he has a different perspective on life.
That's really cool. If you mentioned Robin's name earlier, I totally missed it because, like, for whatever reason, I thought Robin might have been a different character from the person that comes out west with, to handle the estate and with the older Miss Dragon Knight. So if you mentioned his name, then I totally apologize.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, there's a number of characters. There's a few characters you'll meet, but it's relatively focused. I would say that there are 6 main characters in the book. Most of which you'll meet in the first issue, but some of them are going to be in the second issue. And so you've got Vera and her dragon Blaze. You've got Robin and his dragon Chanterelle, who's a Mist Dragon. And then you've got Jack, who is the leader of the outlaw gang. And he is basically based on Johnny Ringo from Tombstone. So imagine that Johnny Ringo had a fire dragon. That's kind of the character. His dragon's name is Ruin.
Dude, love the name. Love the idea of like basing a character off of Johnny Ringo because that character is extremely iconic. So that's just the coolest. This is I can't say it enough. This is amazing.
Thank you so much.
So your wife's more into the world building. Are you more of like the storyteller then, where it's like you have this idea of like, okay, it's in this world, but you like focus more on like the story part as opposed to like the world building?
I think that we're both into telling stories. I think for me, I've been the thing that I'm mainly bringing to the table here, besides my love of westerns, obviously, is a lot of comic book writing experience. This is Lorelei's first comic book, and so we're kind of working together on that front. And usually the way our process works is that we brainstorm ideas together. We outlined the whole story a long time ago, but we kind of brainstorm ideas together, and then she writes the first draft, and then I kind of assemble that first draft into more of a comic book script format, and then we kind of go back and forth like that. So, and I would also say that there are certain characters that each of us really likes. So Vera is her creation, and Jack is definitely more my creation. And so, I think that that approach has made it so that, all the different characters are kind of getting attention and getting to have an arc and growth.
That's amazing. I love that you two work together, and people they see the finished product, and I don't think that they truly understand the effort that goes into it. Because like my first comic, and so far my only comic that I have published, it took me like a total of 5 years to finally get one out. And before that one actually was done, I started working on another one. I've got the full script written and everything, and that one hasn't even seen the light of day. And that one was a Western. But the other one that actually got published was monster truck related, because like I'm a big fan of racing, and actually my career up until like 2 years ago was in the monster truck industry. And so monster trucks is a labor of love, and comic books is too. And so to have the two combined together was really, really cool for me. And it, like I said, it took me 5 years to get that one done. So how long did it take you guys to get yours done?
Well, I will tell you that I've been working on comics for quite a long time, and this one has been a faster development than some of my previous books, but I owe that to 8 years of, kind of laying the groundwork for this kind of stuff. I would say my first successful book was Unicorn Vampire Hunter, and that one I was working on for about 5 years before I even launched the first Kickstarter. So I have a very similar experience. I would say Dragon Grit, we started writing this about 2 years ago. And then we made the deal with Kay Woolheiser, the artist, last fall. So I would say about 2 years of like developing the idea, and about 6-ish months since we made a deal with the artist and started production.
That's really cool. Is the artwork completely done?
She is, as we are speaking, finishing the final 2 pages of the first issue. And then next month, she's starting on issue 2 already.
That's exciting. Now, do you have it walked out, like how many issues you're wanting to do, or have you kind of left it more like, we haven't quite fully decided where the story is going to go, and so we're not quite sure how many we're going to do yet?
I am are you familiar with the idea of a plotter versus a pantser?
I may know the idea, but I may not know it by that name, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure. So in novel writing, there's this idea called, a lot of people define themselves by either being a plotter or a pantser. So if you're a plotter, that means before you start writing, you sit down and decide the plot of the whole thing. You outline the whole novel, right, as it were. And if you're a pantser, then you're kind of like making it up as you go along. And there are people who swear by both methods, and I am very much a plotter. So we plotted out. We haven't written the script for every single issue, but we plotted out the whole story, and we do have a 10-issue plan. But we also have a 5-issue plan in case it's not as successful as we want it to be. But to be honest, based on the success we've had so far, I expect we'll be able to make those 10 issues.
I'm very confident for you, because to be, have 10,000 already done or achieved is fantastic. Because you started what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
So that's fantastic. You guys are on a roll. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And I love the fact that you're a planner, because like I kind of go back and forth in between, and it kind of depends on the project. Because like some projects, I'm like, all right, I have this amazing idea, I walk it out, and I'm like, yeah, and I sit there and I tweak it before I ever even start writing. And then other ones, it's like, man, I've got this one thing, and I'm going to go with it and see where it ends up. And so I've done both. Both have seemed to have worked for me. Do I gravitate more to one or the other? No, but I never actually knew like the actual titles of doing that. I just thought that knew of like the essential rules of the two.
Yeah. No, it's like by any name, it's the same idea. Do you plan it out before you start, or do you write as you go along? And I have definitely done both too. I've just really come down over the years on the side of I want to have it plotted out. And the reason for that is that I find that the story ends up being more satisfying if I've sort of laid the seeds for what's coming. And given, because if I know what's happening in issue 10, then in issue 1, I can kind of drop hints about what's going to happen. And then when the thing happens in issue 10, it feels really earned, if that makes sense.
It does, because that's kind of, I can't write just one project at a time, and
Yeah.
it almost kind of becomes a handicap thing. But I've doing that with one of the horror series of novels that I'm starting to write now, because it's like, okay, I know this is where I want to end up, and I can start building it in this one specific way that I want to start building it here in book one, and then I know I want this to happen in book two, in book three, and so I've got it all kind of starting to lay out and connect the dots and what all is going to happen and building my main characters and everything.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think we don't necessarily think about this when we're consuming like books or TV shows or whatever, but a lot of times you're like big moments, like big emotional moments with characters, if you saw them without the context of having seen everything that came before it, wouldn't be as impactful. Like, you know, you think about like a moment in a TV show that like really made you emotional or really made you upset, or like, you know, pump your fist in the air or whatever. If you had never seen that show at all and you just watched that scene by itself in isolation, it probably wouldn't feel the same way, because you don't have all the context of what happened leading up to that. Um, and so I think a lot of the work of writing is essentially setting yourself up to score, you know?
Absolutely. A perfect example of that from Tombstone would be Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday. They set it up with the whole, discussion in Latin, and then like the small little things in between. And even, when Wyatt's like, I can't beat him, can I? And Doc's like, nope. And it just sets up so perfectly for that moment where, you think Wyatt's showing up to the gunfight, and then out of the
It's
shadow,
Doc.
you see, I'm your Huckleberry.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, no. Every time I watch that scene, just shivers down my spine. I mean, like, it's good, and yeah, they did a lot of work to set it up, and so that's why I like to plot things out, because I'm like, okay, I want to have this big emotional moment, and how do I achieve that? How do I set things up so that really feels earned, um, and the audience has a reaction to it.
Right. Setting up that payoff feels so good because you're like, man, I know when people get to this moment, they're going to be like, ah, and just like
Uh-huh.
setting it up is so much fun.
Oh yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about you. You said you started writing comic books, what, 8 years ago?
Yeah.
And then, like, before that, were you like writing novels, or did you like one day
No.
decide, man, I love comics. I feel like I can write a really good one?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my the when I was very young, I wanted to be like a newspaper comic strip like artist. Is because I grew up in a household where my dad was a journalist, worked for the newspaper, and I just thought comic strips are the greatest. And of course, as I got a little older, I started reading like X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff like that. But then as I got kind of into like middle school, high school age, I decided I really wanted to uh, make movies, and I ended up going to film school. And then I became what I always say is the next coolest thing after being a film school graduate, which is a film school dropout. Um, and and I kind of decided I wanted to be more on the writing side of things. I ended up getting a English degree, and then kind of wandering around doing that thing that sometimes us millennials have been known to do, like wandering from job to job. Um, Eventually, I became a teacher because I kind of felt like I didn't know I was, lacking purpose, I would say. And eventually I was like, I think I always had this mindset that was like, eventually one day I'm going to tell stories, no matter what format it is. I'm going to tell stories. But I think, especially in my early 20s, I was just waiting for the day to come when I would be quote unquote ready. And then one day I was like, what the waiting for? Uh, there's no magical time where, it's not like when you turn 25 and suddenly you get that packet box of driving skill in the mail, according to the insurance people. Um, but so I just decided to write a comic, because I had some friends who had made some comics, and I had read some that I really liked, and so I thought that was a more approachable um thing than making movies. I had been scared off from the movie industry because it's not a great industry to work in, from what I understand. It's grueling and hard, and it's not. Most people aren't Steven Spielberg, right? So, um, so yeah, comics was what it was, and I think really it came full circle back to what I wanted to do when I was a kid, when I was dreaming about being a newspaper strip artist. So yeah, I made my first comic about 8 years ago. I had saved up some money, and then I went into credit card debt to make it happen, and slowly crawled out of that debt over time. But yeah, and then about 4 years ago, I launched Unicorn Vampire Hunter, which is the first thing that actually made me money and put me on the map and got people paying attention to me, which was very exciting.
I've heard the name. I can even almost picture the cover, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. So I'm gonna have to go back and look it up and check it out. But the one thing I want to focus on first is the idea of like the kid and loving the newspaper comic book strips and everything like that. So what was your favorite? Was it Calvin and Hobbes? Was it Garfield? What was it?
I mean, of course it was Calvin and Hobbes, right? That's the greatest newspaper strip ever made.
Absolutely.
You don't get better than Calvin and Hobbes. I think people have tried, but I think the Far Side is also pretty good, but it's different. I think Calvin and Hobbes like connected with people in a way that Nothing Sense has. There were a few others that I liked a lot. Like I liked Foxtrot.
Foxtrot was a good one too.
Yeah, and then Pearls Before Swine was always one that I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah, Pearls Before Swine too. Those are both really good. One that comes to my mind a lot is Baby Blues.
Oh, yep, that was a good one. And so, yeah, and I actually, when I was a kid, I made some like strips with my dad. Like when I was very young, he like wrote them, and then I drew them, and he still has them like framed and hung up on the wall in in his house.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was definitely a lot of fun. Yeah, and at that, but when I was that young, I didn't really like understand what regular comic books were, and that really kind of broadened my horizons once I started. As like a grade school, middle school kid, I'd get random issues of X-Men or Spider-Man or whatever, whatever they happen to have at the mall. And I think I have one issue of like Ultimate X-Men that I read like 1,000 times, and I didn't have the issues before or after it, but
That's the one thing. Like once I got to an adult, I got to the point where I was like, I want the collections, the graphic novel ones where it's thick, where I can have multiple issues together. Because like the one issue would bother me because it'd be like I'd buy an issue, but then I wouldn't know how the story ended because I didn't have the rest. And so I started focusing more that direction. But my childhood, as far as like getting into the comic book stuff, was somewhat similar to yours. Like any comic book that I did have, it would be like one issue and I wouldn't have the rest, and I'd still enjoy those issues. Batman animated series and X-Men 97, like back in the day, those were the two that really got me like hooked on like the whole like comic book side of things. I don't think you can get better than Kevin Conroy's Batman and Mark Hamill's Joker by any means.
Oh yeah, for sure. And X-Men I loved. I haven't dove into the new animated show yet, but I'm planning on it.
Same. I'm really looking forward to it. Whenever I found out that they were making new episodes of it, I was like, this could be really cool, especially since Kevin Feige was like so focused on like bringing back the whole original cast. I was really appreciative of that.
Oh yeah.
So Unicorn Vampire Hunter. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Tell us kind of like an overview of that story.
Well, the short pitch is that it's about a unicorn who hunts vampires with his horn. But the longer pitch is that it is a story about a handful of characters, a prince who is cursed to live as a unicorn, a a young woman who goes to live with her uncle, the wizard, in a magical marsh where he's got puppies that never grow old. And it's a fantasy adventure story, but it's also a story about found family, about family dynamics, about betrayal and love. I think one thing that people always say to me after they've read Unicorn Vampire Hunter is that it was way more intense than they were expecting. Like if you've got like daddy issues, or if you've got like uh communication problems with your friends, or like it hits a lot of like deeply personal topics, but set up with all the set dressing of like a fantasy world. So I would just say, going into Unicorn Vampire Hunter, like, it's fun. I think it's funny, but also be prepared to get, gut punched emotionally. Um, I'm very proud of the like we were talking about before, that setup for these um, emotional scenes that I landed in that story. So yeah, I mean, I like to think that it stands with things like Avatar: The Last Airbender, in terms of like it has like a sort of cartoon vibe to it, but like when you get down into it, there's a very deep story with like really big emotional stakes.
Those are always so much fun, and I love the fact that you have this like grand, you know, like I don't want to say high fantasy because like I don't know if there's any orcs or anything in there, but like the whole idea of like a unicorn being a vampire hunter and everything, and then putting in real life struggles that people can be like, yeah, I've been there, I felt that. Those kinds of stories are always so good. So definitely, I'm personally going to be checking out Unicorn Vampire Hunter, and hopefully the listeners do too, because it's definitely sounding like an amazing read. And the fact that it's a prince that's like, I guess he was turned into a vampire, or not into a vampire hunter, but into a unicorn.
Yes, in the very small spoiler, but in the first issue, you find out that he was once a human prince, and he was cursed by a witch to live as a unicorn. But he also is there was like essentially a prophecy about him that he would be like the greatest warrior in the world, and that's still true when he's a unicorn. And the way he puts that skill to use is by defending his friends who live in the magical marsh from vampires coming from the dark forest.
That's super cool. So whenever like the little bit of discussion that you and I have had, because I've told you typically I talk music on this podcast, but I have had comic book writers and stuff on here before, which threw you off guard a little bit. But I had asked you, if you liked music or whatever, and you were like, yeah, not so much. So like for me, whenever I'm writing stuff and everything like that, a lot of times like I'll be inspired by music, much like we were talking about inspirations of westerns and stuff. And so like I listen to music and whatnot while I write. Is that something I guess you don't do?
Oh
Like, do
no,
you
I
prefer a
do. I
quiet room?
do. When
Oh,
I
okay,
said I wasn't necessarily super into music, what I mean is I don't know that I can geek out about it. I'm not
okay,
like I'm not like deep into like the scene, as it were. Like, I have a few artists that I really like. I would definitely say that I get inspired by music. I do listen to a lot of music. I don't necessarily listen to music while I write because well, it depends. I will say that when I write fantasy books, I sometimes will listen to music, but it has to be instrumental only, right? Because my brain just can't focus on writing while I'm like listening to any music that's got words in it. Um, and so I've definitely listened to like the Lord of the Rings soundtrack a lot while writing like Unicorn Vampire Hunter, and then um, there's definitely some like Western movie soundtracks that I've listened to like while writing Dragon Grit. But Yeah, I mean, um, I would say like probably a lot of millennials. I like chronically have my earbuds in, and I'm always listening to something. Usually it's a podcast or an audiobook, but listen to a decent amount of music.
That's fantastic. I can just like see you like sitting there writing the script for Dragon Grit and like listening to the good, the bad, and the ugly, like the
Yeah, oh yeah,
woo, wah, wah, wah.
for sure.
Uh, so next, outside of Tombstone, what would be your next favorite Western movie? Would it be True Grit? Because like this question just popped in my head. I'm very ADD if you haven't noticed. But your next favorite after like Tombstone, would it be True Grit, or would it be something more like one of the Clint Eastwood movies, or what would be another big inspiration outside of Tombstone?
Honestly, I really like 310 to Yuma.
Now, the original or the one with Russell Crowe and oh, my brain is blanking, but the one with Russell Crowe.
I like both of them. I think I don't hear like a lot of people talking about the remake. But and I know that it was like a little bit over the top in terms of like the action scene. Oh, it's Christian Bale is the other person
Yeah,
who was in it.
yeah. I was like, he's an American Psycho. He's Batman. How can I not think of this?
Yeah, I think it's like I mean, there's such different vibes, right? Because like the new one, I say new, gosh, when it came out in 2007. But
Yeah, I. It seems like it was yesterday, but it was so long ago.
yeah, well, that movie, the remake, I think is you know a little over the top in terms of the action and stuff. But I really like it. I also really like the original. It's hard for me to say because they have way different vibes. To them.
They really do. I did enjoy the guy that played the villain in that one. That was trying to break out Russell Crowe. I want
Mhm.
to say his name was Charlie. I haven't watched it in forever. I watched it like I guess the last time I watched it was probably 2007 or 2000, like maybe 9 at the latest. But I thought it was a good one. Like I enjoyed it, but I just haven't been like a rewatch of that one.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So yeah, I would say 310 Yuma, like both versions, and then you know, of course, the good, the bad, and the ugly is always a good one, for sure. And
the
then
whole Man with No Name series, I'm a fan of like Leva and Cleve and all the people that were in there. Like they all just make the movie, not just Clint Eastwood. They're so good.
oh, I agree. Yeah, and then um, I would say that like a funny influence of mine is Gunsmoke, and the reason for that is very similar to what you and I talked about, like a grandparent having those old novels. Um, my grandma always, even to this day, she lives in a nursing home now, but she, whenever I go over to her place, she's got Gunsmoke on the TV. There's whatever channel, I forget what the channel's called, that always has that on. It's it seems like they just do Gunsmoke reruns 24/7.
It's
Um,
the Gunsmoke Network.
yeah, yeah, and like you know, I don't know. It's like I've seen so many episodes of it over time. You know, Matt Dillon is like iconic. You know, uh, and so I don't know. I think about that show a lot because obviously it's not as exciting or as pulse pounding usually as you know some of those classic movies, but I always really enjoyed the vibe of it. And you know it's nostalgic for me. It's funny to be nostalgic about something that came out half a century ago, you know, but like I said, is always on the TV at my grandma's house.
Dude, I still watch a lot of that stuff from half a century ago. I don't know. I guess I'm a reminiscent feller myself, but like I love Beverly Hillbillies, Andy Griffith, like all the old shows. And you were talking about like how you gravitate to Gunsmoke because of like your grandma and everything, and the same grandpa that like got me started on Louis L'Amour also got me started on MASH, and that like that was a thing that him and I would do like every other Friday. Is we would sit down and we would just binge watch episodes of MASH,
That's awesome.
and it was kind of the same thing. And yeah, it's weird because like he passed away while watching an episode of MASH, and so like that kind of stuck with me too. And I still love the show, and I think about him often because of like that same thing. And yeah, it's funny how we gravitate to stuff that happened so long ago.
I gotta say that's this is a little bit of a non sequitur, but that story about your grandpa passing away, I think is very poetic. I had a great grandma who loved college basketball, and I live in Spokane, Washington, which is the home of Gonzaga, if you follow basketball at all. And when she died, I mean, she was like, she never missed a game and like loved the newspaper. And my dad was a sports journalist, so she loved my dad. And it was like my mom's grandma, so it was like, her, like, I don't know, grandson-in-law was my dad, I guess. Anyway, she died with her feet up on the table, newspaper spread open to the sports section, reading about Gonzaga's latest game. That's how they found her. And it's like when you hear stories like that, where like people die, like doing, like embracing the thing that they loved. I mean, like that's the way to go out, I gotta say.
Absolutely. I think about that a lot because while I'm not a basketball fan, I love college football. I don't watch it as much as what I used to just because of like schedule and everything else. But like college football is a big thing that I gravitate towards. My family we're big NASCAR fans. And so the Daytona 500 in 2001 was a very, very hard one for us because we were all down Earnhardt fans. And so, dying doing what you love is something that I do think about probably like more so than anything, because it's like, that's kind of how I want to go out, is doing something that I love. And if I don't get lucky enough to do that, at least like while I'm sleeping, so at least it's like flipping off a light switch is what I equate it to. So
for sure. Yeah.
I would definitely much rather go doing something that I love, though. I was actually, I'm a trash man. My family is very blue collar in the sense that we work trades jobs, we work equipment operator jobs and everything like that. Like my dad's a diesel mechanic. My grandpa was a millwright at Chrysler here in St. Louis. And so like those are just the kind of jobs that we have. And I was actually ejected from a trash truck during a rollover. And how I walked away from it unscathed, other than like a massive like hematoma on my elbow, I have no idea.
That's wild.
I'm just glad that I didn't die being a trash man. was where I was going with it.
I mean, that sounds like a superhero origin story right there.
Like, so the funny thing is Wolverine is like one of my favorite superheroes. And so whenever like I came tumbling out of the truck and like got up and walked away from it, I was looking at the truck and I was like, that was not fun. And so like, I'm just like, I have a very much similar, like way of talking and everything as he does. Like instead of bub, I say bud all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do have a little bit of a temper. And so I gravitate to him a lot because of the similarities, kind of like what we were talking about, being able to gravitate towards Unicorn Vampire Hunter because of like, hey, I've been through that. Okay. And, yeah, it was very wild, and it did, I guess, in a sense, feel like a superhero origin story, because out of that I started writing poetry, and actually was the first kind of book I published, was my poetry book. But I had already started trying to work on my comic book stuff and everything before that. And trash has been really good to me in some senses, and then other ways has not been very good to me, but it provides for my family and it takes care of us. So I am very thankful to have it, because I was actually going to leave being a trash man and go back to monster trucking full time in 2019, whenever, like right after that rollover, because I was training somebody, and so I didn't want to I didn't want to be with anybody anymore, and so like I was just kind of done, and I looked at going to work for a monster truck promoter full time, and my wife and I had the discussion, and she's like, I just get this feeling that if you do that, it's not going to be good. And so my plan was to start with this promoter at the beginning of the year when the first quarter starts. And so my first show would have been here in Missouri. And then after that, I would have worked 3 months, and then I would have been out of a job, because the COVID quarantine hit. And so in a way, I'm thankful that trash was still there for me because I was an essential worker. And so like our lifestyle really didn't have to change much, thankfully.
Yeah. I got to imagine having to, if you started a job in the entertainment industry, basically, in live entertainment right before the pandemic, that wouldn't have been good.
No, it would have been super rough. But we're getting close to an hour. And this has been so much fun.
Yeah, man.
Anytime you want to come back to, talk anything, comics, whatever, I'll gladly have you on. But do you have any closing things that you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
Just if anyone's listening, they want to check it out, you can go to dragongrit.com. That'll redirect you right to the Kickstarter.
Dude, fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading this one. I can't wait for Dragon Grit 2 to drop already, and I haven't even read other than the pages that I've seen, I haven't even read it, cover to cover yet, and I'm already looking forward to issue 2.
Well, thank you very much.
Caleb, thank you so much for coming on here and hanging out with us for an hour.
Sure.
We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right. Sounds good.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
What a great time I had interviewing and talking with Caleb about Dragon Grit. So yeah, I still wanted to kind of get on here, talk some music news, and do a throwing dirt segment. Music news wise, I really don't have too much other than started listening to some albums to start going ahead and thinking about album of the year, and I've got a couple to listen to. I highly recommend Blackberry Smoke's new album, and their drummer passed away a couple of weeks ago, and so this is going to be the last piece that he was on, and well, presumably, I could be wrong, but because you never know, there might be tracks that never made it to an album that might come out, but um, they lost a key member of their group, and that's got to be rough. There's a lot that can be said about that album. It's fantastic top to bottom. I highly recommend it. Man, I'm still processing things, so forgive me. Coffee has not been had yet, so we there. Okay, I'm gonna take out this chunk. All right, Hall of Fame for country music has announced that James Burton, John Anderson, and Toby Keith are all going in to the Hall of Fame this year. Toby Keith's son made like an absolutely amazing speech. I'm not even gonna attempt to talk about it any further than that. I highly recommend you go and listen to it. It's touching. A family that is going through so much right now. It's probably an honor, I would imagine. I mean, it definitely is. But what that means to them right now is what I'm trying to convey. Has to just feel so good in so many different words. John Anderson definitely deserves it. Of course, Toby Keith deserves it too. But John Anderson, his career, much like Toby's, stands on its own and is fantastic. Sometimes Hall of Fames get weird, but like this class right here is fantastic, and I love it. Talking about Hall of Fames getting weird, like how is Iron Maiden not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Maybe that's just a personal opinion. They are probably one of my top favorite bands of all time, and they do a fantastic job. But
and other people have, mentioned it. Chris Jericho from Fozzy and a handful of other people, but it took a few other bands that definitely should have been in there, probably first time on a ballot, that didn't make it in there first time on a ballot. And uh, one of those bands in particular, I'm not going to say the name, they didn't even like go to when they were inducted. They had somebody else uh, accept the award for them. And James Burton. James Burton, I wasn't familiar with the name, and so I had to do a little bit of research. And come come to find out, he's like an absolutely amazing guitarist. And so, uh, again, stands on his own with his own stuff. His picture that they used is he looks like a guy, maybe is in his 50s or whatever, but I guess he's much older than that from what I was reading. So I was like, whoa, that was not what I was expecting. But this guy's been around and has been a guitarist on many projects and ones that you would be familiar with. Uh, was even a member of the Strangers at a time. So like this dude's been around forever and has done some very influential stuff. And again, very, very much deserving of a spot. Another thing that I was going to talk about, but it seems more like a Facebook rumor because I can't find any like news articles on it, is that somebody had said something about, oh, it looks like Zach Wild is a full on member of Pantera now. And I'm not finding anything news wise to back that up. And so, because I seen that, I was like, well, if that's the case, then I need to report on that. And I'm not finding any information that really backs that up. While, yes, it's really cool that he is with the group and is doing these things that they're currently doing, it does not seem that he is an actual member. It seems more like he is still just, like one of the original articles that came out a while ago. It's just, Phil and Rex and two of their buddies. Two of their buddies being Zach Wild and Charlie Benante from Anthrax. And so it doesn't seem to be the case. One more piece of music news before we move on into racing uh, stuff with the Throw and Dirt segment. Cody Jinks's new album has come out, which it came out on Friday, this last Friday, March 24th or whatever it was. No, it wasn't March 24th. It was 21st or 22nd. Sorry, my days are running together. But Cody Jinks' new album, Change the Game, dropped last Friday. So only a couple of days ago, since this is dropping on the Monday after the Friday it came out. So if you haven't listened to it yet, definitely go check it out. I have not. I've been really, really busy. So I'm going to listen to it tomorrow at work because I got a feeling that might end up being one of my really close calls for album of the year. But Blackberry Smoke definitely is right there. They did a fantastic job on that album. I guess that's really it for music news, other than the fact that Cody Jinks teamed up with Haley Deegan to sponsor her race car for this weekend to help promote Change the Game, which is really cool because Cody Jinks is an independent music artist. Uh, Haley Deegan is the daughter of Brian Deegan, who is probably one of my absolute, like, he was a dude that inspired me whenever I was younger. And even to this day, because like his life is now like he's so focused on his kids' careers and everything, he's kind of just like hung it up and is just like helping them get going, which I think is fantastic. He's working with Haley with all of her different racing things, and his sons as well. And his one son is just an absolute terror on a dirt bike. Like the dude is amazing, goes big. Uh, yeah, it's incredible to watch. So they've teamed together. He's sponsoring her stock car for the Xfinity series for the weekend, and how did she finish? Because I saw some of the results, and Haley Deegan finished 23rd. So Kyle Larson won, and Haley Deegan finished 23rd, since we were talking about that. So, not horrible results. But speaking of NASCAR, I know I said I wouldn't really talk NASCAR on here, but I was listening to the, what's it called? Dale Jr. Download this week. That one has recently become one that I listen to often, just because they've had some really cool guests of like older stock car drivers and stuff on there, like Sterling Marlin. Marmon, Sterling Marlin is still farming and whatnot, even though he is afflicted with Parkinson's. Like, he's still out there trying to live a normal life. He drives late models and stuff. And this was an interview from like a year ago, but it was really cool to have heard Sterling Marlin's uh, podcast episode, because it was inspirational. Like, the dude got a kind of a later start to his career as far as stock car driving. Like, he's been racing NASCAR and stock cars and stuff late 70s, I think he said. But like, his career really didn't take off, because it was like off and on and whatnot up until like, I want to say he said like early 90s, like with the number 4 car with the Kodak sponsorship. That's where like he really was able to shine. And so, like, because he went back to farming like late 80s, and uh like still lives on the family farm, and obviously he's the one running it now and everything. They've got 600 acres, and he is now uh just like I said, farming and doing late model racing when he can. And he battles Parkinson's, and he's been really doing a lot of stuff to like slow it down to where he can still kind of try to have a regular life. And that was really cool. And I had heard about that interview, and I wanted to go back and listen to it, because I was like, wow, that'd be an amazing interview. And it was really inspirational, like I said, because of that late start uh, to like really having success, of like the making it moment. And um you know it goes to show that keep plugging away, and you never know what might come. And that's just really inspirational. But that's not what I really wanted to talk about. What I really wanted to talk about was this last weekend at Bristol. uh it was really cool to hear, because I did not watch the race, because like I said last week, I don't really watch too much NASCAR now. And what really caught my attention was um, the Dale Jr. Download episode this week, where they were talking about Bristol, and they were talking about tire wear, because apparently um, Goodyear's tires, the compound is a little bit different now. And so, like, whenever it was getting laid down, it was peeling up, it wasn't sticking. And so, like, it was kind of seemingly going to be a disaster. Goodyear tried to get out in front of it with some PR, but then like it ended up being a great race. Dale Jr. said, and tire wear used to be like a huge part of your strategy for NASCAR, and they had kind of taken it away. And that, I think that's a thing that people don't understand a lot about motorsports, that I want people to really understand. Um, any form of racing, there's strategy, and or there's supposed to be, there should be, because yeah, it's man and machine together. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. But if you make the machines too equal, and you make it all about the driver, yeah, that can be cool in a way. But then you take a certain part of the driver away, because then you're relying on reflexes and action and reaction and all of that. But you're taking away the mental, as far as, okay, we got to plan out when our tire stops are. We got to plan out our fuel to make sure that we make our fuel stops just right, to where we can end up at the front at the end of the race. Uh, certain races where it's like shorter things, because like even those kinds of strategy as far as like fuel and tires and stuff can go into an off-road race, um which I really kind of began to understand for desert racing yesterday during the San Felipe 250, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. And so it's really important that we remember to keep things kind of a chess match, because like with tractor pulling and everything, a lot of it comes down to strategy, gearing, and like planning it out. Like, okay, what tires are going to hook up best with this dirt? What kind of gearing am I going to need? And being able to make those changes and to plan out and to kind of make those thoughts in those directions is a huge part of it, not just push the pedal and go. And so I'm with Dale on this, and a handful of other people were too, that uh, think that it's really good for the sport. I was pumped to hear it, and I might actually watch a little bit of NASCAR now, because if that continues to be a thing, that could be really cool. Will I be reporting on it here? Yeah, probably not as much as what you would think, because I would much rather focus on the off-road stuff, because that's my favorite. Which brings me to the next tire thing, where we had the discussion last week where we were talking about the tires for the World of Outlaw stuff with Volusia and Pierce being suspended and a couple other guys. So, and fined. That whole situation, I actually got to watch a video this week that Kenny Wallace made. There's quite a few expletives in there, and he started getting aggravated with himself because like a lot of times NASCAR drivers aren't very, or not NASCAR drivers, but racers tend to not always have politically correct mouths or clean mouths, depending on the phrasing you want to use. And so like people had asked him, hey, can you please stop cussing? Like, I want to watch this with my kids and stuff. So he's really been trying to watch it. And I appreciate that, because I would prefer it to be clean myself, just because I don't want to be around that, and I don't want to hear that. But his take was very appreciative on the whole matter, because he explained what happened without going into detail of what they used exactly. He's questioning the lab results himself on some of it, and he's like, some of this doesn't make sense. And he's good friends with one of the guys, and he's like, I know these people, and this whole thing just doesn't quite seem right. And somebody said something about like, oh, it's because of what they use to clean their car. And he's like, no, that can't be the case, because of what happens with the tires. And he's like, and I clean my car all the time. He's like, I clean it, during the week to get it ready to go every week. And I wash it a lot. And somebody was like, oh, he's using too much Simple Green. And Kenny was like, no, that's not the case. So what happens is there's a compound that you can use to make that tire feel like it's already warm. And this comes into this, strategy again of tire wear for racing, where, okay, if a dirt tire feels warm, if that tire feels like it's ready to go, what's it going to do? It's going to grip. It's like whenever I used to work in monster trucks, we were doing donut competitions because we were on small, concrete floors. Donut competitions can happen at dirt shows too, but a lot of times they happen with concrete floors because you can get a really good spin. But we were hooking, because like by the time our team would go out to do a donut or something, there would already be a little bit of rubber laid down, because there would be like one or two trucks before us. But at the same time, the other trucks that came later would be able to spin really great. And we couldn't figure out like what our issue was, because it didn't make sense. Well, then we were talking with one of the Monster Jam crew chiefs, and he was like, oh, I wet mine down with tire wet before it goes out. So like a spray. Now, Monster Jam competitions and everything like that, you can do that. That's legal. It's okay to, put a little bit of tire wet out on the, tires before you go out to a donut competition. But if it was a bigger, not like a bigger sanctioning body, but maybe if the sanctioning body, being Monster Jam, decided to change the rules to kind of like make things a little bit fair instead of being left to the devices of the teams. And that was also like 15 years ago at this point. So rules may have changed. I haven't been in Monster Jam in that long. But that is something to also think about is, okay, that tire needs to feel a certain way for what it's doing. So with dirt racing, you want it to hook and grip so you can meow and go to the front. And with that kind of racing, there's stuff that goes on in the pits as far as you got to change tires, you got to mount tires, and all these other things. Well, NASCAR, like the tires are mounted and whatnot on the wheels in front of you, and there's one tire company, I think there's one tire company for World of Outlaws, which is where my confusion was coming in last week. But with NASCAR, all the tires are in a trailer. The team goes to the trailer once they get to the track and gets those tires from the uh my brain blanked, from the trailer, and takes their trailers back to their pits after they're mounted and ready to go. So it's all done right there in front of everybody. Nothing can be tampered with, because like even the pits at a NASCAR race are heavily monitored. For World of Outlaws, they trust the teams to take care of their tires and get them ready and everything during the week or the breaks or whatever. So like they bring their own tires. Now they all run Hoosiers to my understanding, but um I figured with them being the sanctioning body that they are, that they would have all their tires in a trailer and like take care of that on their own. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Or it's not the case, is what I mean. And that's just wild to me, because you would think that, like I said, so maybe that's the solution to where these kinds of things don't happen. But then it happens in the pits too, because Kenny said like he's like I've seen it. And he also said that other racers are going to be like the first ones to say something. And how much of this he's questioning, like how much of this was raised as a stink by other drivers that were upset because of how well other cars performed and different things. But uh, there's still a lot of things that are suspect with this whole tire issue with World of Outlaws that I think could just easily be solved. And it seemed like this was Kenny Wallace's thought too, by if World of Outlaws had Hoosier, bring a trailer of tires, they could get mounted and whatnot right in front of you. And there's even small racetracks that do this already for their own. And so, yeah, I think that would be the solution at that point is, okay, you're all going to run these tires. We're going to have them in a trailer. Come and get them from us whenever you get here. And, at the end of the night, you bring them back. And, it's the same way with NASCAR. At the end of the race, you bring them back. And to me, that would just solve a lot of issues. Uh, I kind of want to see it go that way. But I want to discuss the results from the San Felipe 250 from yesterday. It was really awesome racing. Alan Impudia actually ended up winning the race with 5 hours and 49 minutes on the track, which it looks like a pretty grueling 250 miles, and he flew through it for sure. The spec class went to Jason McNeil. He took the top spot with a time of 6 hours 18 minutes and like 113 whatever. Like I can't say that. It was a really fun watch. The qualifying was really cool to watch as well. Score did a really good job with this race, and I really enjoyed it start to finish. And the thing that baffled me with my knowledge of motorsports and everything was, so Ron McCachran is in a brand new Gymco, and it is a beautiful piece. And he's with a team called Fastball Racing now. They dropped this information a couple of days ago, like Wednesday, and like Tuesday or Wednesday. And so brand new news. And I was like, okay, so first race for these people, like for this team, is going to be the San Felipe 250. And I knew that going into this weekend. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. This will be really cool because they're unveiling this new truck, and a lot of people think new equipment not going to break down. That's not the way motorsports goes by any means. It's new equipment, you're going to find all the problems. And so this beautiful piece came out. They went to go qualify, and they didn't even make it to the starting line to attempt to qualify. They had transmission fluid pressure issues, so it wasn't getting enough fluid circulating, and they would have ended up blowing a transmission. So they skipped qualifying, started at the back of the field, charged their way all the way to 14th at one point, but they broke down on the track. So that was kind of a bummer for them. Current number one plate holder. So like, what I mean by that is last year's champion Bryce Menzies had kind of a rough day. He knows how to fly through a desert race, though, much like Rob McCachran does. But um, he ended up like smacking a tree and blowing a tire, and like you could tell that he definitely did because he was missing half of a fender. So he had that issue, and then he also lost a serpentine belt and had to change that on track. And he ended up going all the way back to like ninth or eighth, and he worked his way all the way back up to third. Which in desert racing, guys, that is impressive because like once you get past, it is so hard to catch it back up. And but at the same time, like qualifying first isn't always a solid guarantee that you're going to finish first. And so there's a lot of cool things that go into desert racing that make things really cool strategy wise and everything like that. Like I love stadium super trucks and what that series does because it's like road course races with metal ramps, and all the trucks are pretty similar in builds and everything to where uh, they make it more about the driver. But that can be cool for so long. And if we do that across all boards, it's going to get annoying. But like these desert races where, okay, I know where I need to pass, which you need that for any form of racing. But like, I know where I need to pass. I know, like, here are our pit stops. I know, like, this section of the course is this and all these other things. All of those things apply so much into every form of motorsport. But the fact that the vehicle still has to be so much part of the strategy, those kinds of things I appreciate so much. Uh, the only thing that I see as a benefit for trying to make things equal across the board as far as the vehicle goes for like smaller teams, like in NASCAR, where you're trying to get them to be able to be on a competitive basis where they can compete with the bigger teams like Hendrick and Roush and Penske. But trophy truck racing right now is just so competitive in general. And same with many of the desert racing classes. And it's man, it is just so much fun to watch. So the next one I think is Baja 500. So I would definitely try to make a plan to watch that one. There's one more for the Unlimited Racing Series as well, and I can't remember when that is. But we're getting close to wrapping this up. I do want to talk because Monster Jam did something crazy yesterday, and they live streamed a stadium show down in Birmingham, Alabama. You can get on YouTube and watch the replay. They live streamed on YouTube, and my son and I, we watched most of the race or show. We watched the racing round finals or racing final round. I don't know why I said it so weird the first time. So that was really, really cool because there was an independent in there, which was a really big deal to me. And like, in my opinion, probably the biggest monster truck driver name out there right now, being Ryan Anderson and Son of a Digger. And So I was like, okay, this is going to be a really good race. And it was a really good race. Ryan ended up rolling in the final corner. And so that gave Dave Olfert and Velociraptor the opportunity to win the race. And that was really, really cool because that doesn't happen very often. And it was just excellent. Then Two Wheel Skills, Ryan bounced back, won again. And then freestyle, Ryan also won again. So there were some really good freestyle runs. Joe Foley, who has won most of the freestyles for the stadium tour that they're on this year, he actually ended up blowing up a sun gear or breaking a axle shaft or something because his right rear locked up and he wasn't able to finish his freestyle run. Looked like Kohler may have ended up having motor issues in Avenger, so there was there. It was a good show, and I wanted to kind of talk about the San Felipe 250 live stream and the Monster Jam live stream because I feel like there's some work that can be done on the production side for both. And even for like the guys that do the Mint 400, there's a little bit of work that can be done production wise for there seems to be this disconnect with YouTube and with these live streams where certain things aren't being able to be put across there. Things like the sound's different. I think Monster Jam needs to figure out what to do with some downtime. Um, and you only have so many sponsors, so you can only have so many commercials when it comes to like San Felipe and Mint, because you end up seeing the same commercials time and time and time again. So maybe there needs to be something else that you see for these Monster Jam shows. There used to be filler acts. I haven't been to a Monster Jam show in forever, so I don't know what they're doing in between races now. So like maybe show us the quads, maybe show us a demolition derby, whatever, something, because like there would be times where you had this dead air on the show where you're just there's no sound, there's no nothing, you're just looking at the stats for points for the night to see who would end up potentially being the overall champion. And then for the San Felipe guys, they seem to be battling sound issues all day and even like some lag, which you're desert racing, you're gonna have some of that as far as like lag for your videos. And like you ended up missing a couple of like key trucks like going through certain zones. And so that was kind of like, maybe that production part needs some work. But again, you're going to have some of that because of internet connection and Wi-Fi. So it's a burden and it's a blessing all at the same time, because it's only you're going to have these issues because like connection speeds and upload and whatnot. But then they also had a huge delay in their sound, which I'm sure that they had certain reasons for it, but maybe shorten the delay just a little bit, because the delay was so significant on their talking that my son even noticed like the words did not match the mouths on the video. And he's like, "Oh, they're speaking in a different language and they're translating it because it's such a huge difference." And I said, "No, there's a delay there, and it's causing it to look that way. So maybe change the delay." Just small production things that I see. Obviously, with my stuff, I have my own issues that I need to address, and I totally get that. Uh, but I'm, a small independent guy, and I am trying to address my issues. Some of it I'm still figuring out, and then for them, maybe they're still figuring it out too. But with it being bigger production companies, like these are professional people, with loads of dollars coming in for sponsorships and everything else. That my question is like, where's that disconnect there for the production that we're struggling with at the moment? But that's pretty much all I have this week. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out. Bit of a longer episode, but I'm super pumped on it. I hope you guys are too, and happy Monday to you.